So one of the exciting things about the arrival of Chessbase 17 has to be the wide array of new engine functions that it brings with it. And by engine functions, I don't mean different ways to analyze your games automatically or even positions. I'm talking about the information that it imparts to you while it's analyzing those positions. Frankly, in over 40 years, there haven't been a lot of changes. They've basically been telling us the evaluation, the depth that they're considering, and of course the moves that they're analyzing. But now Chessbase 17 introduces a wide assortment of new ideas to help provide you with information that may help you in your analysis of positions, as well as opening preparation.
Since the very first programs came out on personal computers, very little has changed in the way they provide information to the players. This, for example, is Sargon III, a program that came out in 1983 and therefore is almost 40 years old, and it came out on the Apple II computer. But as you will see, the information it provides really hasn't changed that much. Let's give it a random move that will probably surprise it and force it to think. First, I'm going to set it to level 3, and then I'll give it A2, A3, and ask it to think. And let's look at its output. As we have the current depth, 3 ply, the score, the main line, the moves it's considering, etc. This is actually not a lot different from modern computers. Now let's look at Chessbase 16. So this is Chessbase 16, a typical modern interface. And when I open up an engine in it, this is what it will show me. It will show me essentially the name of the engine, the evaluation, the depth, the moves it's considering, and of course the number of moves per second. But overall, really very little has changed from Sargon III. It is showing us that basic same information. So this is Chessbase 17, and it's the same position as before, but I've added a few more moves to the theory. And when I open up an engine, really not a lot is different. You still have the evaluation, the depth, the move it's considering, the number of moves per second. There is, of course, this little heat map on the right, and we'll go into that in a few seconds. But overall, not very different. You do notice, of course, that there is one main line, and that's really a configuration issue rather than a change. So if you don't see this, and you probably want to get all of the added information, you right click and you go to scroll main line, and we remove that so that it's only showing one line. But still, what's the big deal? Well, the first perk here in Chessbase 17 is that instead of opening up a little variation board, which we had in Chessbase 16, if you want to understand this huge main line, which goes from move 13 to move 34, and it's impossible for a human to really see this, you just mouse over one of the moves, like here, and the board now becomes a sort of semi-transparent opaque board, but it also shows you the position from the main line. If I remove the mouse, we return to the position of the game. Mouse over again, again we have the same thing. So this allows you to visualize all of the main line without actually having to try to reproduce it or open up separate boards. And it allows you to immediately get a grasp as to what it's showing and what it's suggesting. Very, very convenient. But this is merely scratching the surface. So the next thing we have here, if I go over the heat map, now we notice that the entire board is lit up in colors. Every single piece has a color. So for example, the queen is on g3 and it's a dark green. That means it's a near ideal square. The same goes for the bishop on d4. The rook on a8, though, isn't quite as perfect, and therefore it's given a slightly yellowish tinge. And finally, if it were red, that would mean it's in a catastrophic position, possibly on prise. Okay, this is all very nice and well, but what's the revolution we've been talking about? So the revolution really starts with the buddy engine. You see this little button here that looks a bit like a rescue dog? Well, if I mouse over it, you'll see it says, use a buddy engine to annotate the lines. And this, my friend, is where the magic comes in. So we're going to open it up. We click on it, and what it does is it opens up another instance of the engine. You notice how the CPUs, which we're using, 8 is now down to 7. It is now using one of them dedicated to the second instance. And what it's doing is it's annotating all of the moves in the main line. What do I mean by annotating? Well, it's taking the moves and trying to give you more information. So the first thing we notice, and I'll expand this a little bit here, The first thing we notice is that it's giving us a lot of more information in the main window. We not only have this very interesting graph showing us the evolution of the evaluation in the main line. Yes, that's not the game, that's the main line itself. But it is also giving us text information. The position is equal. Black gets the bishop pair after move 23, bishop takes f6. And please remember, we're on move 13. So this is a commentary on the main line itself. You notice, of course, that the evaluations here correspond to the moves in the main line. 16, h6, and so forth, these are moves that it's analyzing from the main line. Try to see whether these are alternatives that are worth considering. So we have queen c7, rook a d1, rook a d8, or h6. So it's already telling us that even though the main line says rook a d8, h6 is absolutely to be considered. Again, the same thing for the next one. You can play bishop f3, or king h1 is to be considered. These are viable alternatives. As it advances in its information, it's going to give us more information on the main line itself. Now we already have the d file opens with d takes e5. Exchanging the knight for the knight, there's a maneuver for rook a8, d8, d7. White gets a backward pawn on c3 after b4. All of this is really nice, but it doesn't stop there. If I expand the window even more, now we get to see there are threats. The threat here is rook a d1, queen c7, bishop f3, which it says is going to give white a nice little advantage. Remember, this is black playing, so it's trying to tell us that as black, this is something we have to be careful about. It also warns us, please do not play knight takes e4 because there's queen takes g7 mate. Brilliant, but it doesn't stop there either. So as time passes, the buddy engine will begin to annotate the main line with these little colored squares. So what do these mean? So over here, for example, we have 17, f takes e6, f takes e6. And the square is basically an evaluation in color of the two main moves. The main move, f takes e6, is considered, well, roughly even. It's not great, therefore it's a slightly brownish color. But the second move is much worse, considerably darker. And basically what it's telling you is this is a point where you could possibly go wrong, and therefore you have to be very careful, because the next best move is really much worse. A little further down, we see now another square, but this one has a diagonal cut through it. So what does that mean? Again, the colors represent the top two moves and their relative evaluations. But the slanting diagonal means that the move here is actually a relatively forced move, which is actually fairly easy to find. And if it were an inverted diagonal, it would mean it's actually a much harder to find move. So these are potential points of interest that you might wish to investigate. Points where you could possibly trap your opponent and they might be caught unawares, simply because they weren't able to immediately evaluate the dangers in the main line. All of these things will allow you to analyze openings with much greater depth and greater interest, possibly allowing you to find hidden wins where other players were not able to.
So that wraps up my overview of the new engine functions in Chessbase 17. And as you can see, there are a lot of new ideas, and kudos to Chessbase for trying to shake up the status quo and provide us with new tools and means to analyze positions and openings. It's obviously really early to be able to talk about the best ways to make use of them, since frankly, these are new ideas and they just came out. As time progresses and I learn about different ways and better methods, I will gladly impart these and share these in future videos. If you have ideas of your own or thoughts, please share them in the feedback. And I hope you've liked this video, and if you did, please subscribe.